Thank you for joining Associated Luxury Hotels International for this episode of Beyond the Meeting Room. Named as National Honorable Mention in the 2024 Folio Eddie and Ozzie Awards and the 2025 Central Region Gold Azbee winner by the American Society of Business Publication Editors, Beyond the Meeting Room is hosted by ALHI's President and CEO, Michael Dominguez. Each episode, ALHI shares candid conversations on a variety of topics to enhance your personal and professional life. The Coeur d'Alene Resort is a luxury destination in northern Idaho, known for upscale accommodations and breathtaking views of Lake Coeur d'Alene. The resort features 32,000 square feet of versatile event space, including scenic waterfront venues and private cruise boats. With 338 guest rooms, exceptional dining, a world-class spa, and award-winning golf with the famous floating green, your group will experience both productivity and relaxation. Experience elevated events in an unforgettable lakeside setting. Today, Dr. Michael Sorrell joins us again for another thoughtful conversation on life and leadership. Michael is the longest-serving president in the history of Paul Quinn College and an engaging keynote speaker with inspiring messages emphasizing the importance of authenticity, resilience, and a willingness to take risks in pursuit of success. Listen in and learn to lead with love.
Well, Dr. Sorrell, thank you for coming back to Beyond the Meeting Room and our podcast here. We've had you before, but you are our first that we've ever filmed live. Just so you know, we've never done this in a filming live. It's always been a voiceover.
I'm all about the cutting edge.
Well, speaking of cutting edge, I just got to hear you at our Inspire event, and you once again nailed it. And I really, yes, your energy and your delivery, and we talk about that with speakers, but I think your message is something people don't talk enough about. And I've had the privilege now of knowing you a couple of years and having a few conversations, and your message of leading with love is just something we don't hear in our environment. And I'm on this big crusade right now, and when I'm having our events and we're talking, I think we've lost the point of why we get together face to face, and it's really focusing on the humanity of why we're there. And I think that's the message you deliver. And I'm not saying this to pump you up. I'm saying it because it's a message of hope and love. And I don't know if there's enough messages around those themes in the world today, candidly.
No, well, first of all, thank you, right? It's always fun being with you guys and being with you. I learned along the way that a lot of people think that expressing your feelings makes you weak. And I don't subscribe to that.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe some of it is because nothing about me says weakness, right? Like I was an athlete,
right?
Like I'm not the biggest guy in the world, but I'm not a little guy.
You ain't tiny.
But I just think that if more of us could just simply express that we care about each other,
right?
That we care about the people with us, I just don't know why that doesn't make a better world, right? Everybody responds to being told that they matter.
Yeah.
So why not tell them they matter?
Yeah, I think it's funny. I had this conversation recently, just this week, with one of our clients. We were sitting there talking, and I said, I don't like the word vulnerable because people use it like, I'm going to be vulnerable. I said, you mean you're going to be a human being?
Yeah.
Well, why do we have to classify it?
Yeah.
That I'm going to be, and I go, the fact that you have to classify it means you're not always real and you're holding back instead of saying, I'm a human being and I have all emotions you have. Some of it is joy. Some of it is sadness.
I had an experience once where a really close friend of mine was dying of cancer. And, a young man, he had 2 young sons and a wife. And I was in a staff meeting and I was talking about it to my staff because, I'd gotten a text message in that moment saying they had taken a turn for the worse. And I tried to explain to them, and I just broke down in tears, right? Like just, and not like, the cool, I mean, like, and afterwards, our librarian who has been at the school longer than I have. You know, she comes up to me and she says, you know, your willingness to show us who you actually are and the things that move you, she said, it's why people are willing to do hard things for you, because you're an actual person. And I just, you know, you never know why people do the things that they do for you. You like to think it's because, you know, for the right reasons, but it meant the world to me, and it encouraged me to just live out loud, right? And to live in a way that people got to see the highs and the lows.
Well, and I hope that's the message people take away. It's been the last 3 weeks. It's funny you said that, because it's been the last 3 weeks that I've been talking very openly. And I had a LinkedIn post that exploded, and some people kind of missed the message. But, you know, my best man at my wedding passed away in 6 months from brain cancer.
Oh.
And, you know, the one thing that I've been sharing and talking to people, I said, you know, and talking to my wife, I made the commentary that I promise you, Rudy, on his 65th birthday, never knew he wasn't going to be around for 66. And it was a reminder that every day's a gift. You know, life is grace. And I tell our team that often. And I shared this even we had an all-team meeting, which I bring the entire company together 3 times a year. I think it's important for us to get together and dialogue. So when we're together, I was ending and I was sharing that. I had more of my team and it was interesting when they said, thank you for being so real with us. And again, it's not that I'm not, but I sometimes forget to share the pain that I may be going through that makes me more human to them, because I think they think I have no pain in my life. Now I just manage it well, but we all have that pain. And I think that's the lesson I hear from you all the time, that the more we can express that, the more it moves and inspires people to say, oh, wow, we're all human beings. We all share in that human condition. And I think in a little way, they're closer to me by knowing that little piece of me that they understood. It's like, yeah, this impacted me, and it impacted me in a big way.
Well, and it helps you, because one of the things people don't really appreciate is it is lonely at the top, right? I mean, you know, people see, oh, well, you make the most money. Listen, let me tell you what being at the top means. You don't get invited to the birthday parties, the happy hours that the staff just goes out for, right? Like, nobody really wants to party with the boss. Right? And so you go from being a person who, and the reality of it is, and you strike me as this person, people always liked you, right? Like, you're personable, you're engaging, right? And then you become boss, and people are they back away a little bit. So you have to figure out, and one, you have to understand, there's a part of that just has, it's just is what it is, right? But finding ways to connect with people that bridges the gap in an entirely appropriate fashion.
Yeah.
And I never thought about it from the context of sharing one's pain, but I think that's it, right? Because the reality of it is, all of us have pain, right? Like, it's a common denominator, right? And it cuts and it hurts and it stays with you. And if we are honest, listen, the trauma, sometimes, like, we need people to help us navigate the trauma.
It is.
And we do that at Paul Quinn. First of all, we have the students all have to do mandatory mental health evaluations when they enter the school, right? So everybody gets a baseline, right? And it's because we want to destigmatize this idea that there's something wrong with people struggling. All of us have a season where we struggle, right?
True. Very true.
I don't know anyone who has it. I know people who deny it, right? But in and of itself, they are struggling, right? But the ability to process your pain and share it publicly, I think speaks volumes about you as a leader.
Thank you.
And I think it makes people want to challenge themselves.
It's been a great learning for me, and I've always been very open. Like, I'm old enough that I started before Excel, where we had Lotus. Remember Lotus and Lotus Notes? There was something called WYSIWYG, when you needed a
I don't
copy,
know.
and it stood for what you see is what you get. And it was copy and paste basically, but it was named WYSIWYG. And I used to always tell people, I'm WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. Blame my mother or thank my mother, whichever camp you fall into. But I know I'm a lot of my mother, and it was, I wear it on my shoulder. But I think what I think kind of separates it, when you're in your role, when you're in my role, you want to be calm and strong for the team in the greatest crisis moments.
Yeah.
But we don't always come back and show. That doesn't mean I wasn't carrying a heavy load.
That
right. Doesn't mean I wasn't struggling. And I think that's a mistake as leaders, that we don't circle back. I wouldn't do it in the moment because we need to show calm and strength. But later we need to come back and say, I was suffering just like you. And this is how I need to push through. And that's where I'm learning to be able to share that. And I wasn't trying to hide it.
Yeah.
I just wasn't intentionally sharing it.
Yeah.
And I'm trying now to intentionally share more so that people understand this is the humanity side of it. But I'm reminding everybody, there's this clip I show now when I'm doing a state of the industry, but it's Jensen Huang with NVIDIA. And I go, I not only think he's one of the smartest people on the planet, I think his humility and the way he looks at the world when he's having these kind of conversations, it's just phenomenal. And there's a clip from him that he said that everybody says follow your passion because they connect passion with happiness. He goes, I don't think that's right. He says, not every day brings me joy. He says, not every year brings me joy. I'm not happy with my company every day. I'm not happy every year. He goes, but I love my company every single second. And there's something he says that sticks with me. He actually says, nor should joy be the definition of a good day.
I like that.
That has stuck with me. And I kind of end with this message because my message to everybody is, guys, every day I'm here is a good day because I know what the alternative is. And my friend Rudy brings that home for me. Every day is a gift. And sometimes the things we worry about and the people that we love that we forget to tell them, we love them and connect with them, it just kind of hits home more. And I think that's a lesson that leaders have to take away, to always remind everybody to be in the human moment, not just in the moment. Let's be in the human moment so we can connect.
You know, I am conducting sort of this, what I will call radical experiment in parenting with my son, who's, with me a lot. I'm trying to teach him how to be a husband long before he will ever need to be a husband, right? So every day I try and navigate for him what it means, because like my dad didn't teach me that.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't know really very many fathers who teach that, right? Because it's sort of hard, right? Like, and it requires a lot of work, but, and so there are days where, I'll take him to school or he'll be in the car and my wife has made me just so mad, right? And it's, and it's never angry over like big ticket items, right? It's like, stop moving my, right? Like I have a system. It may not be your system, but it's my system. It works for me. And you're driving me crazy, woman. And so, but I'll show him. I was like, your mother makes me so mad. Right? I said, but let me tell you something. There's no person on this planet that I'd rather have make me mad, right? And I am mad about little L things, right? Your mother gets all the big L things right, and there's no one else that I would rather love and spend my life loving, right?
What a great message.
Sometimes because you have to navigate, right? Because they see you being mad and you don't build a bridge for them. They're like, our parents' marriage is in trouble, right? Like, mom and dad, and I may have gone a little too far because his big joke now is he's like, I don't know how the two of you got married. Right? I say to my wife, he was like, what did you see in this guy? Right? Like, oh, that's brilliant. Like, see you little snot.
Yeah, I'll finally turn on you.
Like, I'm incredibly charming, right? But he really, and what I see starting to click with him is he's starting to figure out, okay, like, I'm in this incredibly safe place, and my parents have a loving marriage, And even in the context of a loving marriage, because the other thing that I was telling him this week, I was teaching him, I said, look, because, he's starting to show interest in girls, right? Like, and not let me be obnoxious, right? Like and I was telling him.
He actually notices the girls. That's what you mean.
Well, he always noticed them, right? Like, just might not know what to do with his nose. Like, but, and I was telling him, I was like, look, people are going to tell you to pay attention to the relationship. Like, I say you do want to date people who have a family background, have the appreciation of a family unit and background. Right. It doesn't necessarily mean that they can't come from single parent households,
right?
But there needs to be something there that you believe, that you see will translate into the kind of family you want to build.
Right.
I said, now, just because people are married doesn't mean that they have a positive relationship.
Right.
I was like, so you've got to pay attention to how they get along. And, and I was like, and, even with your mother and I, right? Like, you don't see your mother, like your mother and I, you don't live in a home where people are yelling at each other.
Exactly.
You don't live in a home where nasty things are said to each other, right? You live in a home where even if we're fussing, like, look what we're fussing about. We're fussing about picking up. We're fussing about, like, your mother wants me, like, I'm on my way to catch a flight, and she's like, can you take the garbage out? No, I can't take the garbage out. I'm catching a flight, right? Like,
I got to do everything.
And, like, one of the funniest things was the day that I got announced as one of the world's 50 greatest leaders, right? I come home, and she knows I've been selected as one of the great leaders, right? She literally is just like, at what point are you going to take the recycling? At what point? Why do you leave it here so long? And I'm like, this is surreal, right? Because everybody else is calling me, talking about how, I came in between Reese Witherspoon and Jamie Dimon on the list, right? Like, that's not bad company. You want to talk to me about recycling. I was like, I'm in the Twilight Zone. Right?
She's like, when are you going to lead your butt down to the recycle bin?
She's like, you didn't make my list of the world's 50 greatest leaders, right? You might be their list. Until you take the garbage out, I'm withholding my vote, right? Like, I mean, it's just...
You know what's a great lesson for your kids when you talk about it's the little things? Nobody can make you that frustrated about the little things except the person you love.
That's exactly right.
And I think that's what people miss. The frustration is because I can be frustrated because we love each other intently. And that really doesn't matter. And it's almost our little game. It becomes a little game and the longer we're married because we're going to be in this consistent rhythm,
I explain to people all the time, my wife has always been an emotionally safe place for me.
Right.
And because I'm emotionally in a safe place, I can go out and do all these other things because I start in this really wonderfully warm environment to grow out of, right? And that, like,
that's special.
That's special. And I try to honor it every way I can.
And I think sometimes we don't appreciate it enough, when you're in it. And recently I was telling my team, and I meant this sincerely. I said, I've been married 35 years because my wife has never made me guess on what she's feeling.
Yeah.
And I go, and she can do that today because we're both mature enough that she can do that where I don't feel like I've done something wrong. And I'm not taking away the right for her to feel the way she's feeling. That could be, you're traveling too much. I'm not getting enough time of you. I'm not getting enough attention. Doesn't mean you're not spending time with your kids. Doesn't mean you're not doing all those other fatherly things and you only have so much time. And I see the head shake because I know you feel that. But she's not wrong. And the thing is, when she reminds me of that, it means I need to spend a little more time. And I need to be intentional about that. And I've told my team, that has been a successful relationship because she never makes me guess what she's feeling. Please don't make me guess.
Yeah.
If you're feeling something, because sometimes I've got 30 things going on and I'm not noticing that you're feeling this way, I just think that's important. But I love that you were teaching your kids what a relationship's supposed to look like. And yeah, do you subscribe to the thought, because we're in the same household. My kids never saw us yelling at each other. When they knew we were really fighting, we were quiet. There was no talking going. And I don't know if you've ever been in this mode. We were so quiet so long that then we start laughing because nobody wants to break. And we just start laughing because like, okay, this is silly. Like somebody's got to break at this point. But the kids, that was the thing. The kids started to pick up. If mom and dad are quiet, there's something going on here, you know? It's the only time we were really, really quiet. And the interesting thing, though, is because of that, we didn't have anger in our household. We never had yelling or fighting. There have been family members we've disconnected with over the years because that was what they brought to the table.
Yeah.
And we weren't going to have it around our kids.
Yeah.
And I think there's too many people that are like, we're family. I understand that, but family, I have expectations too, because the family I most care about are my children and the environment and the lessons we're teaching them. That's why I said, do you subscribe to that thought? Because I think sometimes, I know that's hard, but to tell other family members, we have expectations if you're going to be part of our family, around our family, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that is such an excellent point. And because I actually spend time thinking about this because of some of the relationships in my family. Right. And what I've come to realize, first problem with family is there's a segment of them that in their eyes never stop being whatever age it is that they last really remember you. So in my family, like I left for college at 17. And, I came home for a couple summers, but other than that, like I've been gone.
Right.
So there's this whole other aspect of my interpersonal development that they have no idea, right? Because, I've been gone 40 years, right? 40 years. Yeah, we talk on the phone, like on holidays, but by and large, the really tough stuff of emotional growth, like, and sometimes I have to tell my sister, I'm like, you do know I'm not 17 anymore. Like, you do know I'm a father, right? And a husband. And so whatever version of me that you're referring back to, that version doesn't exist anymore. Now, it exists for you, but it doesn't exist for the rest of the world. And you got to make some decisions now.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we love you, but this is on you now, right? Like, because 40 years behind.
I saw a clip and it was Tyler Perry when he was winning some award. And I don't know if you've seen this, but he talked about that. He says, if you've ever seen a rocket ship go into space, the boosters break off when it reaches a certain altitude because they weren't meant to go where you're going.
Yeah.
And he says, and there are people in our lives that are rocket boosters. And they will break off, and it means, and he says, doesn't mean we don't love them. It doesn't mean we don't care about them. It just means they were never meant to be consistently with us through the entire journey.
Yeah,
They're the rocket boosters.
People grow at different paces.
That's it.
But I think we also have to understand sometimes we're others' rocket boosters.
Exactly.
Right? Like being in education, what I've learned is that as the college president, like I'm a rocket booster, right? Like my job is to launch you into the next stratosphere, right? And then to let you flourish and understand there are going to be others who take you another distance.
Exactly.
Right? I'm your cheerleader. I'm here to mentor you when you call or when you need me. And I'm so honored because, lots of my students, lots of my alums call, right?
Yeah.
And, they want to run ideas by me or they have questions and things like that. And I take that as a sign that at a minimum, I've managed to create some type of positive relationship where they trust that I will always be able to help them.
Right.
Right. And that,
it's special.
Yeah.
And I think you're probably this person that's what our job is to move and grow and help the world be a better place. And you help people and they make the world a better place. And I'm of that same belief, not in the academic side. I don't have that opportunity, but I know in my own space, am I making people really focus on what is important? Because I have a saying that our team hears all the time. And I try to remind them every week if I can, is we work to earn a living. Please don't forget to live.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
this isn't life,
that is something like I'm working on a book, right? And the jumping off point of the book is something my mother told me on her deathbed, right? And, it was literally the last conversation that and she said, son, I love you. I love the man that you're growing into becoming. And you've always been so ambitious. And I never had to worry about, you want to conquer the world. She said, but I worry about you. Because, I got all of the family. I was there for your game. I was there for recitals. I was there for your sister's things. It's like, I got them all. Like, your father was working. He said, and he built a great life for us, and the restaurant did well, and we always knew where he was. So it wasn't, a case of him running around or anything like that. He said, at the end of your life, when you are lying here wondering, what was it all for? What was all about? She's like, those are the sustain you life. That my prayer for you is that you won't be so busy making a life for your family that you forget to live the life with your, right? And, I was all, right? But I never forgot that.
Yeah.
And so what I've tried to do is build a life where my family is included in the things that I do, right? And it means that my professional accomplishments may not have reached or may have yet reached the pinnacle that some people think that I'm capable of.
Right.
But I'll tell you this much. They have allowed me to be the version of a husband and father that I want to be. And there's nothing more important than that to me.
Have you found, and I've seen it through my life, the pinnacle's changed. It's not, I'm still as ambitious as I ever have been, but my ambition is now more about people than my role in the position. And you know what I've learned, and I say this often to young leaders, I have never, ever in my career thought about the next role.
Oh, yeah.
I have focused everything I have on the role I have, and then everything has opened up. That next, and I know your story we talked about on the podcast. This came out of the blue, and it's exactly that if you can pay attention and focus and do the things you're supposed to be doing, the rest of it does take care of itself. And when people ask what's next, that was always through my career. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I only care about what's now. What's next will come, and it's interesting because I think it's where leaders really need to get to. I've never valued or put myself in a place where my title has that meaning. My title doesn't define me. How I treat people defines me.
Yeah.
And that's what I think leaders miss. It's not my title. It's not my position. It's my role. It's literally how we treat people. And to your point, how you're remembered. And it's those calls later. And you said it in our, I got a LinkedIn message this week or 2 weeks ago. And it was somebody who worked with me 7 years ago, didn't even work with me, worked in our company, was in our marketing department, was having a meeting with us. And he sends me this note. And he goes, I just need to share with you because he's long gone from that company. He goes, I'm sending this note to you because he goes, something you told me in our conversation has stuck with me all these years. And he's telling me the story, but I still have behind my desk is Gumby and Pokey. And we're talking and we're 20 minutes into it. He goes, what the hell's with Gumby? I've got it behind my desk. And I said, it's my reminder to always remain flexible. And that is why it's always been there in my office, because we can get so stoic instead of understanding I need to remain flexible, to open to the world, open to ideas, open to people. He said, I have quoted that story, or I've quoted the Gumby analogy my entire career since that message. He goes, I just want to say thank you. And he goes, and you probably won't even remember the conversation. And sent him another. I remembered because you're one of 3 people that ever asked me about Gumby. They all saw it.
Yeah.
He's one of the few that asked me. But something like that, Michael, later I'm just I had an impact and I didn't even know it.
Yeah.
And I've influenced him and I didn't even know it because he says, you made me remember to always remain flexible and not think that I'm always right. And I don't think as leaders we sometimes recognize it's not the people we're leading that you can probably have the biggest influence on. It's kind of the people that you just come across. and have that moment of human engagement or human interaction.
Well, and remember, people are always watching.
I know.
They're always watching.
One of my favorite quotes is from Thoreau. It says, what you do speaks so loudly, I cannot hear what you say.
I love that.
And that is one of my favorite leadership quotes because it's my mentality to say, they're watching. And you can say this, if you act a different way, it don't matter, you're done. Because you have to live to what you're saying, and we started with our wives. There's my truth teller. She'll tell me. I have to share with you, when you said she's always messing up with your routine, I'm right there with, especially when we travel together. Like, I got a routine. Like, I travel all the time. And when she's telling me what's going to happen at the airport or not, I go, you do know I do this every week, right? I got this. But the funny thing is, I always told her, thank God I am not blind. Because this lady used to love to change the furniture, and I'm always tripping on it. Like, why'd you move it around? And if I was blind, I would be tripping on everything.
You would kill me. You would kill me, right? Like,
it's something that's simple, middle of the night. I have bruises all over my shins, and it's because I hit everything as things get moved.
Listen, I travel way more than my wife. I have my bag. I put stuff in my bag to reduce the number of things that I have to remember every time.
Exactly.
Like my shaving cream, toothpaste, deodorant, right? All that stuff. She took my bag, right? When she traveled earlier this week. Consequently, I get to the hotel room last night, no deodorant, no shaving cream, no toothpaste, right? Like, what? She was like, I was like, what? She's like, well, that, like, I was like, it's my bag. Right? It's my bag. Like, I bought you bags. Right? Like, this was my bag. Like, why are you asking me? Like, I'm intruding upon my own bag. Right? And I just, like, as I'm calling down to the hotel room, and I was like, listen, I'm better organized than this, but I don't have any of the stuff I need not to be a hot mess tomorrow, right? And the lady who I spoke to, she checked me in, very wonderful woman here, and she just laughed. She's like, we'll take care of it, Dr. Sorrell. Like, we'll get some stuff up to you. It's like, thank you very much.
So, how's the college doing?
It's going well. These are going to be difficult times for higher ed.
Right.
I think one of the things that some of the things disruptors don't understand is, no matter how badly you think something needs to change, there are elements of it that still are working.
Right.
So you have to be thoughtful in the approach.
Right.
Right. Education is a very complex tool.
Are you seeing anything that I see a trend line around vocational schools, and especially Gen Z? How is that impacting? Because my thought is that impacting how a college has to look at curriculum that you're providing, knowing that you have a group that is now looking at maybe going into vocations versus higher ed, how we used to define it?
So here's what I think is interesting. One, schools used to have the vocational track.
Right.
Right. And those kids did not go to college. It just provided, opportunities for them.
Yeah.
To do things.
I went to school with vocational schools. Yeah. Wood shop, car shop, all that. Yeah.
And so, what I think has happened, first of all, I'm always distrustful of people who say everybody doesn't need to go to college.
Right.
Because all those people send their kids to really good colleges, right? So you're not talking about your kids. You're talking about other people's kids, right? How dare you put a cap on somebody else's kids' potential, right?
Exactly.
But I think as institutions, we should have to adapt and evolve, right? Like, I love tradition. And, I wrote my dissertation. A good chunk of it was, on the history of education, how education evolved, right?
Right.
Well, the guilds are not the same thing as colleges are now.
Exactly.
Right? And people, Rainey Harper, who was really the founding president of the University of Chicago, people don't know this. He was the mastermind behind community colleges, right? He thought about extension schools and weekend schools and night school. Like, he made those things. Nobody ever would think of the University of Chicago as one of the birthplaces of community college, right?
Right.
But what he understood was people needed to be in their communities to reduce costs sometimes longer. So if they can spend 2 years at home, then come away to school to kind of get, polished up, that would benefit them. That would be more cost effective, all of that. Well, that model had to evolve. So there's always going to be a need for things evolving.
Right.
That's okay. Like, look, our model is representative of evolving. There wasn't a like, I know there weren't urban work colleges and the corporate work program because I created it. It's my dissertation.
Right.
It didn't exist.
Right.
Our 4 pillars, these are all in response to the evolution of the marketplace. Why shouldn't we? So if we need to make room for kids who are more interested in vocations, okay. So then my challenge is, let me show you why you need to finish off your vocational education.
Absolutely.
With what we're doing. Because I don't dream of you always working for someone else. I dream of you owning your own company. You want to be a woodsmith? Great. But own the company.
Yeah.
Right? Own the company. I think if we would just stop thinking about all of this from places of scarcity,
yeah,
and think that these are zero sum, and there's room enough for all of it.
You just said something that I talk about often. I said, the issues we deal with today in our world, the problem is we're trying to talk about them in A or B, and there's a C, D, E, and F. And that's the issue. They're complex. They're not in a black and white. They are not, there's a lot of gray in this. And I just don't think that we're having that conversation. That of saying, yeah, that fits for some. How's it fit for others? And how do we make that work? Because when you look at vocational school, I completely agree with what you just said. Where my head was going when I was reading all this is like, we used to always say, your first 2 years are your basics. Well, how does the vocational school become my first 2 years? And now there's an add-on for those extra 2 years, but I've had my vocation. And to your point, now let me tell you how to run a business. Now let me tell you what to do with that vocation that you've just learned. To me, that's the shift. But for my time growing up, it was like your first 2 years don't matter. It's the basics. You don't really need to pick your discipline until you get through those first 2 years. But that's what I think is being substituted. When I review it, it's the vocation side of it. I want to learn a trade. I want to learn a skill. And now teach me what I'm going to do with that skill.
Yeah, and the other piece of it too, if we're doing this thing right, we're also teaching them about how to live.
Exactly.
Our Every Quinnite is an entrepreneur program, where every Paul Quinn student has to create a business before they graduate. Well, this is about teaching them to be the entrepreneurs of their lives as well as a business. Because the tool that you need to create a business, you know what? They are absolutely transferable to the skills you need to create a life for yourself.
I love that.
And I just think I think people miss that.
But man, way to circle back to, it's about teaching people about life. I mean, seriously, and how to live and what you're doing with your kids. Tremendous. I think I'd be remiss if you didn't share with everybody about your kids not being on social media.
Oh, yeah. Well, so my wife and I made a decision that our kids won't get phones until they're driving. Right? And that means that they don't get social media. Right? Now, my son will have an Instagram account that I control. So he's like, it's just like I don't have it anyway. It's like, exactly. Right? And so the way this has sort of he's become a bit of a celebrity because of this. So one evening, he got in the car and he said, Dad, are you going to let me have a phone? No. He said, then I've decided I'm entering the portal. I'm entering the transfer portal, right? Because that's a big thing in sports now, right? And I was like, he's like, I'm entering the family portal. I think I can get a better NIL deal somewhere else that will include a phone. So I fall out, right? Because it's the funniest thing I've heard in a long time.
That's hysterical.
And he says, but listen, don't tell mom. So I tweet about it, right? I get on Twitter and I was like, one of the funniest things ever. My son has informed me that he's entering the transfer portal. He's shopping for an NIL deal that will include a phone, right? A reporter, a good friend of mine from the Dallas Morning News, calls me up and says, you all don't let the kids have phones? I was like, no. She's like, this is a great story. Can we write a story about it? So they come out, they write a story. It's a front page, like, Metro story. The Oprah Winfrey Show picks up the story. They call me up and they're like, listen, it's the Oprah Winfrey Show. It's kind of like my Trammell Crow moment where I'm like, sure, it's the Oprah Winfrey Show, right? Because why would they be calling me? And she said, you don't let your kids have phone. You don't let them have this free access to social media? No. So we're doing a story. We're doing a whole episode with Jonathan Haidt about this issue and about, the damage that it does and all this other stuff. And we'd love for you all to be on it. It's a little bit of a rush. Can you be here by the end of the week? So in my mind, I'm thinking, in what universe do I tell Oprah that we won't be there, right? Forget Oprah, in what universe do I tell my wife that we had the opportunity to be on Oprah and we don't go to Oprah, right? So the calendar gets cleared, we're all going to New York, right? And we're on Oprah. And so, we wind up being, it goes well, right? And part of it goes well because, my wife recognizes this is her moment, right? And when I tell you she was delivering, material that I was just like, who is this woman, right? The lights came on and she was like, this is my moment, right? And so she knocks it out of the park. Knocks it out of the park. My son knocks it out of the park. And so last week, we get a phone call out of the blue. They're like, we'd love for you to be on Oprah's podcast, right? So they're like, does your son still, not have it? Yeah, absolutely. So we get on the podcast and, it's great. Like the three of us are there and Oprah's, there and Jonathan Haidt, all that. And so it just becomes hilarious because Oprah's like, well, has this made you less popular? He's like, no, I'm still. I was like, Oprah, let me just answer this right now. If this is what unpopular looks like, we should all pray to be unpopular. Wherever I'm walking with him, people are yelling his name, whatever. So my wife crushes it again, right? It goes well. So, as our part is closing, Oprah's still on the air and everything. So she's like, I love that family. And that son is so good looking. Like, he is such a handsome kid, right? My wife hears it. You would have thought they said it about her. Now, listen, my wife is absolutely beautiful, right? Like, no question about it. But at that moment, I had no contribution to the child. Right? She's like, did you hear what Oprah said about my son? Oh, did you hear? She's like, Oprah thinks my son is good. Son, you're so good looking. All we get. And I'm just like, honey, you do know I contributed to the genetics, right? Like, somewhere in there, Oprah's giving me a nod too, right? But it's a wonderful experience to have for my family. It's all because, I don't make a judgment how anybody else does their parenting thing. Right? But for me, I see the impact of unfettered access to social media every day. And what I try and tell people is if you just want to get a sense of it, just go on social media yourself for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And then just scroll.
Yeah.
And then count the number of images you see in those 2 minutes. And I tell them, when I opened up Mike's Instagram account, I was floored by the number of inappropriate direct messages that he got.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And I was like, what if I wasn't here to manage this? Like, then my son is having these conversations. And then, there's this whole, I don't know if you've seen the story. There was a young man who was 14, fell in love with an AI chatbot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, I don't want to end stuff on a downer, but that story in and of itself was terrifying.
Yeah.
Right? It was terrifying.
And, we're heavily committed, I know to human trafficking and the grooming that goes through social media. It's intense. And I think it's something that people just need to be aware. As a parent, you need to be aware, you need to be involved. And, I'll share a piece of parenting.
Yeah.
And it was before all the technology, but when my daughter was in trouble and she was being punished, and she would go to her room and it would be the privacy. And I told my wife, I said, watch this. Came in with a hammer and a thing, and I took the door right off her hinges, and the room's wide open. She goes, you can't do that. I have my privacy. You don't have no privacy because you're in my house. And this is where we're going to be because we can't trust you right now. And it was that little freak moment, but it only took one time to explain. No, we have the right to make sure we know what's going on with you at all times, because that's our responsibility as a parent.
And this relationship functions on trust.
Exactly. And right now I can't trust you, so the door's gone.
Yeah.
And when I can trust you, the door will come back on, but you're going to have to earn that back. And that was, a little dramatic.
I like it.
But it was impactful.
I like it. I like it.
So let me end with one thing for you, because I know your background. You got to explain the Dallas trade. And you're a Dallas guy. Just putting your basketball hat on, because we've had that story before, and I know you at one time were actually going to be running a basketball team. So I understand there could be some logic in it, knowing that there's a max, agreement coming up and all that. Your thoughts on the trade? High level?
I think what people have to come to understand is when you change leadership groups,
right,
you change cultures, you change values, you change, in a sense, what people are going to find acceptable and what's not acceptable. And there's always a growth period when people change. 5 years from now, the ownership group will be a very different ownership group.
Right.
They may analyze these things in a completely different fashion, right? But I think you have to. Listen, people aren't going to get over this, right, in the city.
No.
Right? They're struggling. Like I've not seen anything like this.
No, that's why I was asking.
Right? Like it is.
For those that aren't in Dallas, it's a big deal.
Like it is. It is. And I think
it's almost like shutting down a football field in Texas.
Except with millions more fans, right? Like millions more fans. And I think at the end of the day, this will be whatever it's going to be. There was a vision. I think you can understand the theory,
right?
And you can really understand the theory if you aren't from that community.
Exactly.
Right? If you're from that community, then I think you begin to understand just and by the way, it's not, you have to look at what happened with the Cowboys and how long it took people to forgive Jerry Jones, right when he fired Tom Landry.
Yeah.
I put it on that same kind of analysis.
By the way, my wife has never forgiven him.
This is my point, right? Like people are passionate about their icons.
Yeah.
And I think when you come into a market, you sometimes can think it's going to be all right. Like it's not that big of a deal. And and I will just own it. Like there are aspects of decisions I had to make as president that people have never forgiven me for, will never forgive me for. It doesn't matter how much success we've had. It doesn't matter how high performing the institutions become. Right. I disturbed their sense of peace and their reality, and they will never let that go. And there's no amount of apologies I can make to do it. I just have to strive to communicate better on the front end.
It's funny because that was kind of your closing message. About getting over that fear and being able to do what you need to be doing. And I candidly, before I asked you that question, I had never thought about it from the leadership perspective. And that's an interesting, by the way, in full transparency, I'm a diehard San Antonio Spurs fan for one reason, that culture and the consistency. And to your point, nothing has changed in 30 years. Who they are, what they represent, how they do it. And Pop always says, we win, we lose, we do it with class, and we go home. And that is that mentality. But to your point, when Pop goes away, how do you keep it breathing and living? And what does that look like? Because that's always the concern. Can you keep that culture going across the board? And I find that fascinating. I had not even thought about it from a leadership perspective.
No. It's, I think ultimately their rationale was sound.
Right.
It made complete and total business sense when you look at it, when you take a step back and look at the big picture.
Yeah.
Right? Like it does.
Yeah. It's a $300 million investment coming up,
But the fan aspect of it, they don't look at it that
No.
way. And that's, like I said, I would not have understood both sides of this as well if I had not lived through, on a much smaller level, that same type of thing, right? And I think you got to give people leader space to do what they feel is right and best. But I think as a leader, you got to understand
There's going to be some heat.
there's going to be it's hot.
Dr. Sorrell, we could go all day.
Oh,
I so appreciate you, sir. And more importantly, keep inspiring the world and keep spreading the
Thank
love.
you.
I think it's such a needed message, and not enough people are doing it. So I appreciate what you do every day.
And you guys keep doing great things, because what you do is influencing people far beyond your market. So thank you for that.
Thank you once again for your time.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Meeting Room, presented by Associated Luxury Hotels International. ALHI is a global sales and marketing organization representing the finest luxury hotels, cruise lines, and destination management companies. For the latest industry news and to see ALHI's robust portfolio, follow us on LinkedIn and check out our website at alhi.com. To learn more about Michael, follow him on Instagram at Michael Sorrell or find his speaker page at leadingauthorities.com. The Coeur d'Alene Resort is a luxury destination in northern Idaho, known for upscale accommodations and breathtaking views of Lake Coeur d'Alene. The resort features 32,000 square feet of versatile event space, including scenic waterfront venues and private cruise boats. With 338 guest rooms, exceptional dining, a world-class spa, and award-winning golf with a famous floating green, your group will experience both productivity and relaxation. Experience elevated events in an unforgettable lakeside setting.